It's Ripley Day. Netflix has just released a limited series called Ripley, starring Andrew Scott, based on the Patricia Highsmith series. This series has been in the works for a really long time. As far as I remember it, they were supposed to start filming in 2020, which means that they would have announced it even before then. It got pushed back due to the pandemic, and then it's run into another myriad of problems, including strikes and whatnot. And I think they moved distributors. I think it was supposed to be on either HBO or it was Showtime, and they moved to Netflix. So there's just been like a number of things that has kept it from coming out, and it's finally here. I'm so very excited. I haven't watched any of it yet because I have tickets with my roommate to go see Monkey Man tonight, and I want to be able to, like, I don't know, it just sounds so perfect to like cuddle up on the couch with my blankets and a drink and watch as much as the series. Maybe not totally binge the whole thing, but at least be able to like just sit and put my phone away and watch it and not have to stop it for any reason and not get interrupted. And if I started it tonight, I would have to stop it to go see Monkey Man, and then I would be thinking about Monkey Man and I wouldn't be able to start it again when I got back. I'm playing with a cloudy LA day right now, so it's gonna be really sunny, and then it's not, and then it's gonna be blinding and you're not gonna be able to see me, and then it's not. So we'll see how this goes. So I'm gonna start it tomorrow, Saturday the 6th, and I'm sure I will have more updates for you on how I feel about it. Right now, I'm nervous. I'm very nervous. Andrew Scott, as I think I've talked about before, I think like is quite honestly might be like the best actor that we have living on planet Earth right now. He never fails to bring such empathy and layeredness to his characters to the point that like you believe him. And there's a difference in my head between like when I'm watching a movie and I see an actor and I'm like, that is an amazing performance, right? And that doesn't mean it has to be big or flashy, but it's a performance, and I know that, and I can say, wow, they should win an Oscar for that performance. Versus this other state of acting that I think only a few people have ever reached, and that's like, I forget that I'm watching someone acting. I feel like I am watching a camera following a person living their life. For anyone that wants to know, I think that Heath Ledger is one of these actors, particularly in the film Candy from, I believe, 2006. This is a performance where we were just watching someone live their life. Like, that was not a performance. He was just existing, and he has that like innate capability to be able to body a character like that, and I feel that way about Andrew Scott. And he seems to do this with almost every single character I've ever seen him in, and so it doesn't seem to be dependent on the writing or the direction that he's given, which is astounding, that regardless of the puzzle pieces that he's given, that he's able to turn in an amazing look into someone's life every single time. My best example of this is I watched a like 4-hour long bootleg version of a performance of Hamlet that he did, that if you're on that side of TikTok, I'm sure that you've seen clips of him doing it. I love Shakespeare. I love watching plays and performances. I love the film versions of Shakespeare plays. I have never before watched someone that you understand, like in a modern day setting, even though it wasn't set in the modern day, you understand what he's saying. You get it in a way that I've never seen another performance of Shakespeare done before.
To die. To sleep. No more. And by asleep, to say we end the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die. To sleep. To sleep. Perchance to dream.
And so all of that is to say, I love and respect and trust Andrew Scott so very much. This is what I'm worried about. I'm worried about some of the other roles. And it's not that I don't like those actors, they're just not what I would have imagined. And so I feel like it's gonna be very much up to the direction. I'm a little bit worried about the black and white thing, because I think something that I was so impressed by when I first read Ripley is how modern she seemed to be able to make it. Miss Highsmith in the 50s, I think it was published in the 50s. Yeah, 1955. It felt so modern. It felt like she saw into people like light years ahead of their time. And so I'm a little nervous that the black and white setting is going to date the story of Ripley and therefore keep a lot of people from either watching it as a whole or from not being able to like relate it to modern day people and settings. I'm also worried, as much as I love and adore Andrew Scott, the books range like a long span of time, and some of the clips that I've seen that I assume are supposed to be him in the first book, the aging looks a little wacky, which I think is silly because like all of the press tours and everything that Andrew Scott's been doing recently for like All of Us Strangers or whatnot, like he looks amazing and he looks much younger than he is. So I feel like there were better ways to do it than whatever aging they've got going on in some of the previews for this series. But these are all like, this is just me like ranting about all of the things that I'm worried about. So that might not be something that like when I watch the actual series is a problem. It could be clips that weren't done yet, or maybe the makeup and whatever will make more sense in the context of how they do the show. But as of right now, I'm worried about that. And this isn't necessarily something that I'm worried about yet, but I'm very interested to see how they split up the show, because I looked it up on Netflix earlier and it's 8 episodes. I just typed Netflix into Netflix. Okay, yeah, so it's 8 episodes, and as far as I can tell from looking at the description and the pictures for each episode, I think the first 3 episodes are the first, no, 4. Is it just the first book? I think it might just be the first book now that I'm looking at it even closer. But this, So 8 episodes for one book, and this is a limited series. So it's not Ripley's story. I thought the whole point of the series being Ripley was that it was about his character, and so it was with the other books. But I don't know. This is all conjecture based on the very short clips and pictures that we have seen so far. So I'm gonna save all of this grief for tomorrow, but those are the things I'm worried about. I'm very interested to see how Dakota Fanning and Johnny Flynn do. I like both of them. I can't say, obviously Dakota, it's like more so I liked her, you know, as a child actor. I think we're pretty close to the same age, and I grew up watching all of her movies and really, really loved and appreciated who she was in those movies. I don't know, I just remember like as a kid, like this is like, you know, 5, 6, 7 years old, like feeling like we like got each other. Like it was like, I just loved seeing her on screen. I think particularly in like Uptown Girls was like her little OCD tendencies and everything. Just like, I just felt seen and loved her. but I haven't seen her in a ton as an adult. I know she's taken less projects, but I also just haven't seen a lot of them. I will say when it was announced that she was gonna play Marge, which we haven't talked about the movie at all yet, but Marge was played by Gwyneth Paltrow in the 90s film. And when it was first announced, I was like, that's perfect. I feel like she's gonna be able to play that dynamic so well. What was interesting was the casting of Johnny Flynn. He's to play Dickie Greenleaf, which in the 90s film, Dickie was played by Jude Law, who is not one of my favorite characters, but I think it's far and away agreed on that Jude Law in The Talented Mr. Ripley is one of the most attractive things ever. And no disrespect to Johnny Flynn. He is so talented. If you guys haven't watched Song 1 with him and Anne Hathaway, I think that was one of his very first films. I would highly suggest watching that. His soundtrack for that film is like some of my favorite songs and pieces of music of all time. He's so good.
I remember her red tank top tucked to her Vanderbilt blue jeans, her eyebrows painted on like arches of sin, loose in the magazine.
But I feel like they're definitely going to be playing into like a different part of Dickie. I think they've both got that like charisma and that ability to like look you up and down and make you feel small. But in the end, Dickie was still like a soft playboy. And that's not, I think, where Johnny's gonna be coming from, unless he's doing something new that we haven't seen from him. I don't know. Either way, I'm very interested to see how the both of them do in those roles and the chemistry that they have together. I think that Andrew Scott could have chemistry with a brick wall, so I don't think it really matters what kind of chemistry they have with him. Okay, since I finally managed to bring it up, let's talk about the 1999 film adaptation, The Talented Mr. Ripley, starring Matt Damon, Jude Law, Gwyneth Paltrow, Philip Seymour Hoffman, and Cate Blanchett. I love this movie so much. It is one of the great surprises of my life that I got into this film and this series as much as I did. I remember seeing it when I was little. We had it on VHS and I remember my parents watching it, and I remember it always being in our cabinets, but I really didn't remember the film. Okay, so the first time that I rewatched it as an adult was February 2020. I gave it 3 stars and a heart. I rewatched it again a year later in August of 2021, and I bumped it up half a star to 3.5 stars and a heart. December 2021, so only a few months later, I gave it 4 stars. And then I watched it again 1 month later in January 2022 and gave it 4.5 stars. And then it has remained at 4.5 stars the several times that I've watched it since then. This, within the span of 3 years, became one of my most rewatched movies on Letterboxd, and honestly, every time I think about it, I could go rewatch it again. I could rewatch it again right now. That actually sounds like an amazing idea. So anyways, the movie. I think this movie honestly has some of my favorite film scenes of all time. My number one being...
Now that you're a double agent, and we're gonna string my dad along, what if we were to buy a car with your expense money? Okay. Great.
Hello, Tom.
Hello, Marge. Marge, what do you think? A little Cinquecento with my dad's money.
Oh, please, Dickie, you can't even drive a car.
You can't even drive.
Now, what we need urgently, Tom, is an icebox. What do you think? Agree with me and I'll be your friend for life.
I absolutely agree with Marge. Icebox.
Again, I have all the faith in the world in Andrew Scott, but Matt Damon left some big shoes to fill because I think he played him perfectly. I honest to God don't know how he wasn't nominated for something, because the juxtaposition of him being like a charming, charismatic young boy who can dress up and do his hair the right way and be super cute and get the ladies and X, Y, and Z, but also be Ripley, which I don't mean to give you any spoilers, but if you don't know, I don't know why you're watching this show. Like, to be murderous, to kill horrifically his friends and his partners. And he plays that juxtaposition so very well. Obviously, the scene when he impersonates Marge when he's upstairs in Dickie's room digging around is one of the most jarring scenes I think I've ever watched in my life.
No, I like him.
Marge, you like everybody.
Don't like you.
Then I'll go to your place and you can move in with Tom.
I like him. Marge, you like everybody. No, I like him. Marge, you like everybody.
Because you, at least I did, like the first time I watched it, I didn't realize that Matt Damon was talking. I legitimately thought it was Gwyneth Paltrow, so I was very confused, and it was so jarring when I figured out that it was him that was talking. Another lovelier version of this is when My Funny Valentine is playing over like a montage of them in Italy together, and you find out that it's Matt Damon singing at the end of the scene.
You're breaking my ribs! What? You're breaking my ribs! But don't change a hair for me. Not if you care for me.
That's what? Too much. And then there's Philip Seymour Hoffman, who is an asshat in this movie. He's so shitty, and yet every time he's on screen you're like, okay, because he just plays it so incredibly well. He's so entertaining, and he so very clearly understands like the purpose of Freddie Miles's character. I actually don't know who's playing Freddie Miles in this new one. Maybe I'm not gonna look it up. I'll just wait and find out. It's gonna drive me nuts until then. But yeah, I don't know who plays him in this new one. And then interestingly enough, Gwyneth Paltrow and Cate Blanchett aren't two of my favorite actresses, and they're both phenomenal in this movie. Cate Blanchett, I definitely understand her talent. When I watched Tar for the first time, you know, when it came out, that was a huge turning point for me, and at least like understanding how talented she was. But Gwyneth Paltrow has never been my thing. She is phenomenal in this movie. The way that she captures the idea of this like female hysteria in the 50s and not being believed and everything is just fantastic. And I don't know, you expect her character to be like bitchy and put herself on a pedestal, and she's not. She's so kind to Ripley the whole time that I think you also get another side of like, it doesn't matter who he's taking advantage of in the story because she's so sweet and kind to him and truly did not deserve it. It's beautiful. Some of the shots in this movie are some of my favorite shots in a movie ever. So all of that to say, it grew on me, and I absolutely love the movie, and I will continue watching it over and over and over again. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the book now. So I'm falling in love with the movie, and then my dad and I went to a Barnes & Noble, the Barnes & Noble that I used to work at. And he brought me over this copy of The Talented Mr. Ripley and was like, have you ever read this before? And I didn't know it was a book. And then I immediately started reading it and fell in love and was like, this is gonna be one of my favorite books of all time. When I was reading this book, it was one of those things that like, I wanted to read it faster because I wanted to take it all in, but I also couldn't read it slow enough because I wanted to like truly submerge myself in her writing and read every single word with the depth and honesty that this book demands and how it should be respected. One of my favorite sections of this book, if not my favorite, I literally like underlined, bracketed, but then had to put these stars next to it to like really get the point across. He had an impulse to go back not necessarily to go back to the Italian, but to leave Dickie. Then his tension snapped suddenly. His shoulders relaxed, aching, and his breath began to come fast through his mouth. All he wanted to say, at least, "All right, Dickie," to make Dickie forget it. He felt tongue-tied. He stared at Dickie's blue eyes that were still frowning, the sun-bleached eyebrows white, and the eyes themselves shining and empty. Nothing but little pieces of blue jelly with a black dot in them, meaningless, without relation to him. You were supposed to see the soul through the eyes, to see love through the eyes, the one place you could look at another human being and see what really went on inside. And in Dickie's eyes, Tom saw nothing more now than he would have if he had looked at the hard, bloodless surface of a mirror. Tom felt a painful wrench in his breast, and he covered his face with his hands. It was as if Dickie had suddenly been snatched away from him. They were not friends. They did not know each other. It struck Tom like a horrible truth. True for all time, true for the people he had known in the past and for those he would know in the future. Each had stood and would stand before him, and he would know time and time again that he would never know them. And the worst was that there would always be an illusion for a time that he did know them, and that he and they were completely in harmony and alike. For an instant, the worldless shock of his realization seemed more than he could bear. He felt the grip of a fit as he would fall to the ground. It was too much, the foreignness around him and his different language, his failure, and the fact that Dickie hated him. He felt surrounded by strangeness, by hostility. How Highsmith gets across the idea of Tom slowly coming across the idea of killing Dickie is just fascinating, because you believe that his mind has led him to this place. You know, he's had a past with these kinds of situations, and so you know that it's in him, but it's not like this was like something that was premeditated, that he was planning from the get-go. And it's also not something that just broke in him because he made him really mad one day. It was something that as he got to know Dickie and started to see how Dickie treated him and Marge and anyone else he cast aside, how he in his head convinced himself that it was deserved, or that it was coming about in the most natural way. He goes on a few paragraphs after the big one that I just read to say, Tom sat opposite of him, staring at his bony, arrogant, handsome face, at his hands with the green ring and the gold signet ring. It crossed Tom's mind to steal the green ring when he left. It would be easy. Dickie took it off when he swam. Sometimes he took it off even when he showered at the house. He could do it the very last day, Tom thought. Tom stared at Dickie's closed eyelids. Crazy of emotion, of hate, of affection, of impatience and frustration was swelling in him, hampering his breathing. He wanted to kill Dickie. It was not the first time that he had thought of it. Before, once or twice or 3 times, it had been an impulse caused by anger or disappointment, an impulse that vanished immediately and left him with a feeling of shame. Now he thought about it for an entire minute. 2 minutes, because he was leaving Dickie anyway, and what was there to be ashamed of anymore? He had failed with Dickie in every way. He hated Dickie because, however, when he looked at what had happened, his failing had not been his own fault. Not due to anything he had done, but due to Dickie's inhumane stubbornness and his blatant rudeness. He had offered Dickie friendship, companionship, and respect, everything he had to offer, and Dickie had replied with ingratitude and now hostility. Dickie was just shoving him out in the cold. If he killed him on this trip, Tom thought, it would simply say that some accident had happened. He had just thought of something brilliant. He could become Dickie Greenleaf himself. He's just so interesting because he justifies everything that he does. He's so unaware of himself sometimes. He talks about like murderers and different things as if, you know, he is not one of them. But he justifies everything that he does so rationally in his head that he believes himself. And you at times believe him too. It's one of those movies and one of those books that you're like, you start cheering for him because you want him to get away. You don't want him to get caught. And then you get so caught up that at some point it breaks and you realize who you're rooting for and you're like, why? Why am I rooting for them? When you're inside someone's head and you see how much they've really like worked it out to make themselves not the bad guy, in their heads you start rooting for them. And I think that's so interesting. That is probably my favorite use of like an unreliable narrator, something that I love very, very much, but I think that's got to be my favorite use of it. I read the second book as well and absolutely loved it. I liked it like a little bit less than the first one, but just like a little bit. I think it's just because this is the first book, and if the other book was the first book and I knew those characters just as well, then I would have loved it just as much. There are 5 books in total and I own all of them. I truthfully am like trying to spread them out because few things pain me more than like running out of something that you love so much like that. Like an example is like Heath Ledger films. I have not seen all of Heath Ledger's films, although he is one of my favorite actors, and that is my thing, is that I go and I watch new favorite actors, all of their old movies. But I don't want to do that with Heath because at some point I'm gonna run out of them, and there's unfortunately not any more that can be made. And so I kind of feel that way about this series, where I'm not in a rush to get through them as much as I love them so very much, because then I would just have to start over, which is great. I fight myself restarting this book every day. I'm trying to read my TBR cart and it's like, you know, fighting demons not to just pick this one up and start over after how much I've been talking about it recently. But it's not the same as reading it for the first time. So anyways, I don't know how much this video is going to make sense literally at all, but I just wanted to put together a little thing to talk about something that I'm very excited about that marries my 2 favorite things in the world, movies and books. And I'm so interested to see how this series goes. I don't know, I'm nervous. I'm nervous. I have terrible news. I'm so sad and I feel so ridiculous, but I didn't like Ripley. I watched it all the next day, as I said I was going to on Saturday, and I did end up binging the whole thing, and it was like pulling teeth to finish it, and I just wanted to get it over with. So I watched the whole thing that day, thought about it the whole day, stayed up super late writing this long ass review, and have spent the last 2 weeks really thinking about it. I've listened to podcast episodes about it. I've read lots of other people's reviews and have tried to solidify that yes, that's how I feel about it. I will say a lot of the reviews seem like they're pretty 50-50, but this is a like high end and low end of the scale 50-50, where for instance, like my podcasts that I love listening to that are all on the Ringer network, they loved it. They thought it was a masterpiece. But a lot of the reviews that I read felt similarly, especially about like a lot of the same things, to how I felt about it. I will not be able to put my thoughts into this video more eloquently than I could just read what I wrote. So if it does not interest you to have me read this to you, just go on my Letterboxd and read it for yourself. But I just don't think that there's a better way to do it. So without further ado, this is my 2.5 star rating for the Ripley series. I've been counting down the days to this adaptation since it was announced, even more so in the last few years as production and later distribution continued to be delayed time and time again after I read the first 2 books of the Patricia Highsmith's Ripley series and fell incrementally more in love with the 1999 film adaptation starring Matt Damon. Awaiting Netflix's finally timed release of the limited series the last few months felt like torture, but the day has finally come. I was nervous for the adaptation, but I never doubted the casting of Andrew Scott, who I truly believe may be the greatest living actor we have. We know from Scott's repertoire that he's fabulously capable of playing a villain, and even more so, a charmed young man who's confused himself into madness. See Almeida West End's production of Hamlet. As for the supporting ensemble, I believe the casting of Dakota Fanning as Marge was quite inspired, especially conjointly with Gwyneth Paltrow's 99 portrayal, and was excited to see her back on screen. And as for Dickie Greenleaf, while it's impossible to replicate Jude Law's lightning-in-a-bottle charisma captured in the talented Mr. Ripley, I have long since learned not to doubt the multi-talented Johnny Flynn. Outside of casting, I didn't know much until the first teaser was released not but 4 months ago. I was interested to see how they'd split up the 5 books into a limited series, which I was under the impression they were doing, particularly how they would handle the major time span of Ripley's life, represented in the books, which I assumed was the reason for the aged casting of Andrew Scott, 47. I was also eager to see how swayed they'd be by the beloved 1999 adaptation, which isn't wildly unfaithful to the novel, but certainly takes its liberties. As you can see by my rating, you know where this is going, but it is still truly with the heaviest of hearts to say that I did not enjoy this adaptation. Like the 1999 film, Ripley 2024 only covers the first novel in the series titled The Talented Mr. Ripley. Talented details young 25-year-old Tom traversing picturesque southern Europe under the initial guise of convincing Dickie to return home and settle down at Greenleaf Sr.'s request. Ripley's unreliable first-person narration leads us delicately and convincingly toward a routine of psychopathy that destroys life after life around him, while keeping us, his audience, safely in the delusion of his righteous anger. If they weren't to cover the plot of more than the first book, I was pleased Ripley at least dabbled in the topics and interests of the second novel, titled Ripley Underground, which follows a vindicated Ripley into the world of art fraud. It's alluded in the final episode that this is Ripley's future, but it's also used as a plot device through Tom's burgeoning interest in studying Caravaggio, the bisexual Italian 16th century Renaissance painter exiled for murder, a fitting interest for Ripley. However, an abrupt left turn in the final episode sends viewers back in time to witness Caravaggio's unraveling, which ultimately feels inconsistent with the style and purpose of the rest of the series instead of representative or thematically on point. Unfortunately, without additional plot from any of the following novels, a story we've already seen and seen done well is stretched into an agonizing 446 minutes of limited series idling, frustrated by emotional constipation. Surely a directorial choice, Scott is without any of his usual charm or emotional outbursts, a reason why I was confident in Scott's casting, and instead plays Tom Ripley stoically and unbothered. Maybe I've just watched Damon's ardently fickle portrayal too many times, but I could have sworn that novel Tom read like a ticking time bomb. So with a predictable Ripley, a muted and lifeless long before death Dickie, and a skeptic from the start Marge, what's to keep us from watching? Not to mention Elliot Sumner's complete miscasting as Freddie Miles, we miss you, PSH. Another strong directorial choice, all 446 minutes of Ripley are in black and white, a cinematic tool that feels gimmicky or plainly lazy when not served well with a purpose. While watching, I conjured up my own justifications, my final interpretation being an allusion to Caravaggio's use of light or lack thereof in his paintings. However, filmmaker Steve Zalian's explanation to IndieWired left me baffled at its insufficient inspiration. He says, when Patricia wrote it, if she imagined a movie being made from it back then, it would have been in black and white. The cover of that book I had was in black and white, so as I was reading it, it was in my mind to be that way. He goes on to say that the darkness of the story felt wrongly placed in the color and glamour of beautiful Italy, a reason why I feel Anthony Minghella's The Talented Mr. Ripley from 1999 is so perfectly dissonant. What feels more real, more juxtaposing than beautiful young players on sandy beaches and in cinematically smoky jazz clubs, while getting swept up in the nasty undertow of jealousy, prejudice, and social inequities. One of my favorite things about Highsmith's book has always been its timelessness, the modernity of Ripley's narration, proof being remnants of his character can still be found in media 70 plus years after its conception. Recently, Emerald Fennell cited Ripley when creating her film Saltburn, brilliantly played by another Irish talent, Barry Keoghan. Ripley has also clearly inspired Joe Goldberg, the capricious narrator of the cult classic television series You. But not everyone will know the source, and this new adaptation was an opportunity to rectify that. I'm afraid the choice to film in black and white, married with no emotional propulsion, will not only turn viewers away, but also keep people new to the story from seeing its innovative spirit. While beautifully shot at times, Ripley feels lost under the weight of a promising cast and its successful predecessors. I don't have too much else to say besides that. I think my overall view, the words that I would best use to describe it, is just that it was underwhelming and flat and it didn't bring anything fresh to the story. And without those things, I'm not quite sure why we felt like a new adaptation was necessary. I did really like an episode of the podcast I listened to called The Watch. They were talking about the idea that Ripley could be a new Hamlet for actors. That's a character that every young man would want to play at some point to prove his acting chops. And I thought that that was a really great point and really interesting. And regardless of how ill-directed I think Andrew Scott was, I'm always gonna be happy to see him on screen. But I don't think an actor's performance is the only thing that can keep afloat an entire production of something. And I know as a society we're very into sequels and adaptations right now and have been for the last 10 years or so.
The economy stinks, bees are dying, movies are pretty much all sequels now.
But I wanted something new, and it felt like wasted time otherwise, which is so sad. With all of that said and done, I will keep watching the 1999 film adaptation. I'm gonna go back and watch a lot of the other film adaptations that I heard about through research for this video, and I'm gonna keep reading the series and be extremely happy and thankful for those. As so far as my recommendation goes, if you have time to watch 8 episodes of a limited series, it's fine. It might stand up a lot better if you haven't seen one of the other adaptations or don't know the story. And again, a lot of people that watched it really liked it and thought that it was a masterpiece. So I'm not gonna tell anyone not to watch it, but if at all possible, I would try not to have your hopes super high up as mine were. And I would also implore you to read the books if you're a reader and to watch The Talented Mr. Ripley.